The Mojave wasteland has no shortage when it comes to graves. More often than not, those graves serve as nothing more than simple landmarks and containers to be looted. But once in a blue moon, you'll discover a grave that has more meaning to it. A history, if you will. And I can think of no grave with more history than the one belonging to Chance, the great Khan who couldn't let go. A few days earlier, Chance can be seen at Red Rock Canyon. The sun is rising and shining its warm light upon the world. Behind him is a boulder covered with graffiti, reminders of Bitter Springs, and on the ground around him, an assortment of chems. Suddenly, Chance is approached by Jessup, another great Khan, and perhaps Chance's only true friend. Jessup notices the graffiti and tells Chance it doesn't do any good to dig up the past. Aiming his submachine gun at Chance, Jessup tells him to forget Bitter Springs, to move on. They're Khans and they've been through worse. But before he can finish, Chance has already risen with lightning speed and grabbed his arm. Jessup only smiles and tells Chance it's good to have him back among the living, because they have a very important job to do. Elsewhere in the canyon, other Khans, also hired for the job, are hunkered down in the dirt discussing their next move. One of them, a man named McMurphy, begins to carve the earth with his fingertip, leaving a shallow line that represents the Colorado River. McMurphy explains to the others that everything east of the river belongs to Kaiser's Legion, and everything west, that's New California Republic land, or at least what they've managed to hold on to. As McMurphy finishes his explanation, an older Khan asks him who's paying for the job. Another Khan replies saying it's raider work, but McMurphy corrects him, saying it's not. It's work of a different kind, and that some big shot from Vegas is the one shelling out the caps. The old Khan nods, but he doesn't care if they make any money. A few dead NCR Rangers is more than enough to make it worth his while. Payback for Bitter Springs, but McMurphy tells him that's not the job. It has nothing to do with the NCR, or even Bitter Springs for that matter. Just then, Chance and Jessup join the group, and it's here we can see just how large Chance really is. A true barbarian in the making. McMurphy is glad to see Chance alive and well, but warns him to clean up his act, his chem addiction, as the last thing they need is him losing it. Chance looks unamused, pulls out the largest knife you've ever seen, and begins to draw. The others watch in silence, and when he's finished, there's a map, both detailed and accurate. But there's something missing, and before McMurphy has the chance to correct his map, he plunges a knife into the earth and wiggles it back and forth to create a dark pit, aptly labelled Vegas. As if summoned by the very word, a figure appears behind them. Chance looks back at the mysterious figure, ready for action, but before anything can happen, McMurphy eases all tension in the group by telling the figure he's late. It's Benny, and while he may be late, fashionably so, Lady Luck is always on time. Later that night, Chance is watching the others talk about the job, the important stuff, the nitty-gritty, like who the target is and who's going to do the killing. But Chance isn't really listening, his mind is elsewhere. It's only when Benny walks by does his demeanor change, and this change catches Benny's eye, the strange way Chance is looking at him. So he asks if there's a problem, and Jessup steps in, telling Benny that it's his lighter. One of a kind, he says, but Chance isn't looking at his lighter, it's the fire his eyes are drawn to. You see, Chance survived the Bitter Springs massacre, a day where the NCR slaughtered a group of Khans. Only few survived, Chance included, but not a day goes by where he doesn't relive that distressing and hurtful day. So he takes chems, anything he can get his hands on to deal with the trauma, and Jessup, his friend, hopes that this trip will do him some good, and maybe help him overcome his demons too. McMurphy can see the worry on Benny's face and tries to reassure him, telling him that Chance is good in a fight, chems or not, but Chance is sweating profusely, and it's not from the fire. He's coming down, and this only serves to worry Benny further, and so he lets him know that if Chance goes berserk, they can figure it out, which is fine by them. The next day, the group are making their way towards their destination. The sun is strong in the midday sky, and Benny is leading the way when he notices a shadow almost blocking the sun. Turning around, he notices Chance and jokingly tells him to get a little closer as the shade would be nice. When Chance doesn't reply, Benny comments that his name speaks volumes, unlike himself, who hasn't spoken a single word since they met. According to Jessup, Chance hasn't spoken for almost 3 years, not since Bitter Springs. Benny asks Chance if he'll let him in on his secret, but as expected, he says nothing. Yet the silence is broken, just not by Benny, or Jessup, or any other Khan. Instead, it's by something on the ground. A body, or what's left of one. Beyond it, a trail leading to more burned carcasses, and beyond that, a raging inferno greedily consuming the settlement that was. Looking closer, they hope it's not the work of the courier. McMurphy wonders if the body belongs to a feral ghoul, but Benny thinks otherwise, as the body's burned, yet the limbs are intact. He continues, saying it looks like the victim crawled this far before he died, as if someone set him on fire and watched as he crawled away. This thought halts the group in their tracks, and they discuss who could be responsible. If not the courier, then perhaps the Legion? But that wasn't right either. There could only be one group who could do this sort of thing, the Fiends. Cautiously, they continued onwards, wary of who was out there, and after several hours of walking, they came to a fork in the road. The Fiends' camp was visible from the ridge on which they stood, and the bad news was that camp was directly where they needed to go. But down in that camp were fiends running hard on chems, madmen fueled with jet and psycho. Hell, they could be taking bark scorpion venom for all they knew. Either way, they needed to make a decision. Under different conditions, the Great Khans have been known to trade with the fiends, which is a delicate process all on its own, but dealing with them in their current state was simply out of the question. And so was turning back just to circle around. Their job was time sensitive, and they couldn't afford to miss their window of opportunity. Benny, clearly agitated by the unexpected bump in the road, took charge and reminded the Khans that they hadn't been hired for their sense of humor, and their guns weren't just for show. Still, they didn't have to go in guns blazing if they could help it. They would sneak by if they could, but in the end, whether they liked it or not, they were moving forward, a direction not all Khans were happy with, but it was Benny's choice. Or at least it seemed like it was, until Jessup noticed that Chance was missing. In reality, Chance was reliving the Bitter Springs massacre. The fires and the bodies had fed his demons a mighty meal, and now he found himself amidst the killing field. Rushing into the camp, Chance watched in disbelief as the fiends toyed with their latest pets. High on chems and caked in blood, they celebrated, dancing around a huge bonfire that transformed the desert camp into something more sinister, with monsters climbing from the depths of hell to slaughter the innocent. Grabbing the nearest fiend, Chance stabbed the beast in the back, and by the time the others have realized they're under attack, Chance had already chosen his next target. The fiends, in their chemmed up state, were relentless, and while Chance was drawing from a bottomless well of rage and fury, he was only human, and as the fiends came ever closer to consuming him, reinforcements arrived, with Jessup leading the charge. It's difficult to tell amidst the chaos if they were winning or not, but Chance is inevitably wounded. McMurphy is badly struck, and then a large fiend, chemmed out of his skull and wielding a flamer, unleashed hell. Jessup, McMurphy, and Benny too were safely out of range, but Chance, along with the majority of the fiends, was set ablaze. Yet unlike the insane junkies, who burned to death in a ball of friendly fire, he pushed through, his body riddled with bullets, and his flesh blistering from the heat as he hurled himself towards the danger. On the other side, he found the culprit and gave him a taste of his own barbaric medicine. Benny approaches Chance, clearly outraged by his carelessness that almost got them all killed. Chance only stares in silence, and before he can receive a scolding for the second time, passes out from the pain. While unconscious, Chance was again burdened by that fateful day. the Bitter Springs Massacre, where NCR soldiers attacked a Great Khan settlement. But there's more to the story than you might think. In truth, the NCR had received bad intel. They believed the camp held only Khan raiders, which it did, but it also held their families, their elderly parents, their wives, husbands, and children too. And despite seeing this, the NCR went on to follow orders until there was nothing left but fire and ash and soot. And those remains became a catalyst that dragged Chance back over and over to relive the massacre, which only he and a few others miraculously escaped, but not unscathed and certainly not unchanged. When Chance was finally allowed to leave that recurring nightmare, he was greeted by Benny standing over him. He offered Chance a smoke, which he silently declined, and then Benny decided to share something with him, a story. You see, Benny runs the Tops Casino in New Vegas, and the casino has various acts coming from all over the Mojave to perform, but there was this singer that Benny knew from way back when he had belonged to a gang, the Mojave Boot Riders, who weren't all that different from the Great Khans. The boys, as Benny calls them, love to sit around the fire listening to songs about the old days. But then they walked the road to Vegas, with all the lights of the old world still glowing pretty as you please. It was there they met the man who ran the city, and he showed them a whole new way to live, and then they didn't need to play tribal anymore. But the singer, he couldn't let go. He continued to sing about the old days, and even talked about hitting the road again. It was clear to Benny that the singer didn't see Vegas as he should have, and so Benny sent him on his way, so to speak. The problem wasn't his singing, but how each time he mentioned the old days, the boys, they would think about the way things used to be, and it plucked at their heartstrings like a piano. Nostalgia is a chem in its own right, more powerful than any jet or psycho, and Chance has been chasing that high ever since Bitter Springs, wanting nothing more than to go back to the glory days. The singer could have left it alone, cleaned up, changed his tune, but he didn't want to change. With that said, Benny pulls out a small bottle of Psycho and hands it to Chance, telling him that he hopes he can keep it together until the job's done, but he needs him to change his tune, and if he can't, well, he's not saying it's an easy road. It's long, it's arduous, there's no denying that. But if Chance doesn't want to shape up and soldier on, then he can live in the past instead. As Benny's silhouette slips out of sight, Chance is left alone beside the fire with his ticket to freedom. In the morning, Jessup and McMurphy find him, cold and lifeless. And Jessup realizes that for all the caps in Vegas, this job was still beneath his pay grade, for he had lost his dear friend, who he very much considered family, but he knows they've been through worse, and digging up the past doesn't do any good. What's done is done. And so, despite Benny's protests, they gave Chance a funeral of sorts, burying him with his knife between the Fiend's camp and Good Springs, where Jessup and McMurphy would go on to help Benny intercept the courier. Ultimately, Chance knew he couldn't change. No matter how hard he tried, or how many chems he took, he couldn't forget the old days, and knew that while he lived, he plucked their heartstrings like a piano. By sacrificing himself, he was saving them from having to be reminded of their past, and instead let them focus on their future. Be sure to show your support by liking the video and subscribing if you haven't already for more Fallout content. If there's anything you would like to see in a later video, leave a comment and I'll see what I can do. With that said, thank you, as always, for watching, and I'll see you in the next adventure.